This is going to be a rather different video that I'm going to be posting because I'm going to be doing a World War I impression that I have. This is going to be my World War I Scotsman of the Gordon Highlanders. So first, before I'm going to begin to get into the combat uniform, I have to take off my barracks uniform. So I have to take off my gaiters that I had installed, which are actually handmade. It's going to take a bit of a while, so I'll speed up the process. Once you're done with that, go on top of the kilt hose and remove the garters and the flashes, so you can remove that and replace them with the khaki version. Khaki kilt hose and olive drab were used in the British Army in the later half of the war, since the extremely colored dice hose was too visible in the battlefield. When I'm done with that, I'm going to put on my kilt flashes. I usually prefer to have mine sit around where my shin bone is, so it's more visible to the eye. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to put on my garters. These are just to actually keep the kilt hose up in place so they don't go anywhere, as well as to make sure that the flashes stay in place. I don't own any that are just stitched. I'll do the same thing with the other one. When I'm done that, I make sure that my kilt hose stays in a clean fashion before I flip over the kilt hose so they stay in place. When I'm done that, it's time to put on my boots. Before you do that though, it's best to loosen up the boots a little bit so they do not feel uncomfortable when putting them on. These are slightly anachronistic because these are actually World War II boots. Ammo boots specifically, so they aren't period accurate, but close enough. Once I tighten up my boots, puttees become the next piece of essential. They're basically leg wraps that come around the ankle of the boots, or at least a little bit lower to keep mud, debris, and some water and extend to keep them out. Understandably, they won't work all the time of being straight, so what I do is after a few wraps, I actually go a little bit up and flip the part of the putty a little bit downward so I can have it better confined to my calves and my knees so they stay in place and hopefully do not feel too uncomfortable. When that is done, I'm then going to have my little strap that is attached to the putty and wrap around at least 2 times before I'm going to make 2 knots on the side and tuck the other part at the end. But then again, people tie it their own way, so tie it the way that you like it. When that's done, do the same thing with the other spine. Hello, doggy invading.
Perhaps you wonder what I am. I will explain.
Once they are on, they should be on nice and comfortably without being too tight. I gotta take off my barracks belt, so I don't need this anymore because I'm heading into combat. The Glengarry I have with me, I'm just gonna put it right where my shoulder is, around the epaulets. This is actually an original Glengarry hat that I own, alongside with its badge, but that too is also anachronistic as this one is dated from 1953. First part of my gear is the PO3 bayonet frog, alongside with an original 1912-1907 sword bayonet. This will come with the PO8 belt, PO8 water carrier, PO8 braces, PO8 ammo pouches, but these are actually New Zealand ammo pouches, designed to actually be stored with ammo boxes. 2 other items are my little bedroll, my sling, and lastly, my Lee Enfield. Before I assemble all of the other parts, I'm actually going to add the sling to my Lee Enfield. I usually start out from the back from where the little ring right here sits. Once I loosen it up, I then attach the first part at the back, and then attach the other one at the front. Don't use the other ring that you see that's near the bayonet lug. That's actually to stack rifles with. When that's done, it's time to set the PO8. The first essential layer that you would need is to first set down the belt on a flat surface. Loosen it up a little bit to make sure it fits your size. In my case, I wear a large. Before I put the other parts, I have to put my bayonet through my PO3. I make sure that there is no space in between the frogs so it would not cause it to be discarded or even disfigured. Once you attach it on, secure it with the belt. We'll set that aside a little bit and we'll start to add the other parts. Locate to where you're going to put your ammo pouches. I like to do, when each time that I set these up, I use my fingers to separate and space out the pouches and a few other items that are necessary so it's easier for me to fit them and not have other stuff that's just in my way and making it super uncomfortable. You can either tighten your belt or you can have it really loose so you're able to run freely. In my case, I just want to make sure that it's comfortable on me, but at least on tight. Once I figure out where the PO8 pouches are going to be, I unbutton the bottoms so I'm able to put them on. Begin by sliding them in the little belt carriers and the belt keepers. You can see from where this zoom footage is, you actually have to push in the fabric a little bit so you're able to then have it put on securely. Do these before you actually have the little straps buttoned back in. Make sure you don't put it on too tight because then you cannot button up the straps again.
You see them on the highway, you meet them down the pipe. In olive drab and khaki, our soldiers are behind. And as the car you pass them, the word goes down the line. Good morning, Mr. Zip Zip Zip, you're surely looking fine. Good morning, Mr. Zip Zip Zip, with your
Little shot I did earlier ago with my bayonet, I'm actually trying to locate where I want it to be. In my case, I want to make sure that it lands directly where my left is, so I can draw my bayonet from that side.
Good morning, Mr. Zip Zip Zip, with your handkerchief to your left, handkerchief to your left, handkerchief to your left line. Good morning.
Once that's done, add your braces. What I like to do with the braces is after when I flip them over so it's easier to put on, I make sure to length out, pretty much like from the previous one of the pouches, is by using my hands and fingers to make sure that they fit, and to make sure that they are the approximate length that I wanted. Once the back ones has been installed, I flip them over again, and then try to reconnect the others, this time the other way around. Just make sure you don't make the mistake like I had by accidentally placing it backwards. Once I figure out where I want the bayonet to be, I actually use the other part of the brace to actually hook it between the little ring, the little hole where it is. Granted, this will be a little bit more difficult to do as now the space is really confined of how thick this canvas belt is. Then for extra precaution, when I'm done adding the bayonet, I then unbutton the straps and have them buttoned on so they remain in place. I do the same thing with the other side so there's no slack in the other part. With the water here, then I unbutton it and use the other extra slack length of the other brace to attach it. Once again, to make sure that they're all inside, you might have to push the fabric in a little bit to get to fit. With the assembly now completed, you're about to put it on. Before you do that though, in my case here, I like to unbutton the epaulets so it's easier for me to put it on without having to unbutton the epaulets. To make sure they stay in place, with the footage zoomed in, there's actually a hook on the uniform so you're able to hook up the cartridge belt and more items on it so they do not slide or even slack around. Time for me to buckle up my belt. Once that's done, button up the epaulets so the equipment does not go anywhere. These things are really useful. When I always put on my stuff, I always adjust my uniform so it's nice and neat. It's time to put my Glengarry on the shoulder epaulette again. The last gear that I have is actually this blanket roll. Gotta button up my Glengarry. Once that's been added, I'm ready for combat. The rifle that the British Army used, and which I have here, is the Sharp Magazine Lee Enfield Mark III. During the war, actually, in the beginning stages, they actually had a problem with rifle shortages, so they pressed older ones until they simplified it in 1915. To add a bit more personality to my soldier, I actually decided to add a flask to my outfit. The bayonet of mine I have here is made from 1912 in May. The cartridge belts works pretty damn fine with the Nerf darts that I have in them. Since I own a Nerf version of the Enfield and not the real deal, it's a bit harder for me to push these into the actual magazine. But when you get used to it, you'll get the hang of it. I'm not portraying a specific unit of the Gordon Highlander and just trying to go out throughout the norm. We'll just show a bit of clips of me attempting to try to do the Mad Minute and a bayonet drill. The Mad Minute was basically a military tradition of the British Army that basically would have to try to fire multiple shots in under a minute. In the case of the British Army, with the Lee Enfield, they would be expected to fire at least 15 shots a minute. I am using the 1917 British bayonet manual for this one instead. Though I'm only using at least 4 attacks instead of at least all of them. I think we made it to the end. This was quite a long journey, but I liked it. So to add up all of the cost in the uniform, we'll put it up right here. This is the combat loadout. And the barracks are a little bit cheaper instead of the combat one. Overall, it costed me $1,000 to get these, but these can vary on what type of class or unit you're portraying. Overall, this was my World War I uniform. I also want to shout out to this man, Hattori, who makes a lot of good videos on the Imperial Japanese Army from World War II. He was the main inspiration and part of others that I made this video. That is all for now. I'll see you out of here.